Hey everyone, it's Dr. Jada, and you are listening to Chat With Me podcast where we discuss life, people, and perspective. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about social rioting, annihilation anxiety, and simply how to just chill out. Okay, so every single day, I work with clients who have anxiety, and anxiety is a pretty common mood disorder. There are several different types of anxiety. Oftentimes, we see in our practice, we see generalized anxiety disorder. And then sometimes we may see people come in with PTSD. And a lot of my clients don't realize that PTSD is a form of anxiety. And then there's anxiety, social anxiety, and there are phobias. And if you are afraid of heights or if you are afraid of hopping into an elevator, all of those are also anxiety disorders. So when we're talking about anxiety, it's easy to just say, oh yeah, this person has anxiety. That means they're paranoid, or that means that they, don't like to be around people. That it means a lot of things in layman terms. But what about annihilation anxiety? I know you're probably like, I don't even know what that is. Well, the reality is most people do not, and it is not a commonly studied type of anxiety. So last year in 2020, we had the George Floyd incident that took place. And not it was just a few months after COVID hit. So here we have this global pandemic that takes place. We're not really sure if people are going to survive or continue to die because of this very interesting infection that's taking place. Now, all of this just seems incredibly insane that all of these things happen during a very short window of time. But at the end of the day, it did happen, and all of us had to figure it out. We had to figure out how we're going to live and survive from one second to the next. But then we had to also deal with this political issue of life versus death. What does this look like? So, what I thought would be interesting for us to do, and of course, I want to get your opinion on it. I'm not going to take the expert role here. I want you to be able to chat with me, talk to me, let me know how you feel about this. If you disagree with me, by all means, write it in the chat, DM me, whatever it is you need to do. I want to know how you feel about this situation. So I thought it would be interesting to just take a look at the chaotic timeline that took place since COVID hit back in, well, we kind of found out about it late January, early February of 2020. It is now 2021, January. It's been almost a year since we've had to deal with COVID. And then the additional social, civil chaos that ensued. So I just wanted to look at the chaos timeline, because we need to know, how do we even deal with this? How do we deal with all of the social rioting, with the civil upheaval that we're addressing now? And I tell you, me and my friends got into it about who's on which side of the fence politically, who should have done this, who should have done that, why didn't that person do this, or why did that person do that, and what do you believe versus what you don't believe. Just a lot's been going on. So I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not taking a side. I'm only taking the mental health side. That's it. I'm just here to talk about mental wellness. But let's look at the timeline. Let's look at the chaos timeline. So May 2020, May 25th, George Floyd dies. On May 27th, the protesters just flood the streets all around Minneapolis. We had that issue. And one of the things they were chanting was no justice, no peace, and I can't breathe. So, following their May 28th, on May 28th, the Minnesota governor activates the National Guard. On the 29th, now this is 4 days after George Floyd's death, he was charged with third-degree murder. Moving forward, protests begin to spread to New York, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and then even in D.C., the White House was locked down for a short period of time. May 23rd, thousands and thousands and thousands of Americans protest across the country. June 7th, in Seattle, a man drives his car into a crowd of protesters, then shoots and injures a demonstrator. June 8th, Seattle police abandon a precinct located in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. Activists renamed the neighborhood the Capitol Hill Occupied Protest, CHOP. They called it the CHOP area. June 12th, in Atlanta, Rayshard Brooks was killed by police after falling asleep at a Wendy's restaurant drive-thru. June 13th, protesters burned down the Wendy's. Now, between June, July, and August, so much happened during that period. So much happened that as I was researching this, I was like, there's no way in the world that I can list all of the riots, all of the situations that took place. It's just too much. It's too much to list. However, what I will make sure that I do, all of the sources that I am citing here, I'll make sure to post those so that you can follow the timeline if you're interested. I'm going to guess most of you already know what happened, but I think it's important to go ahead and talk about this because it's going to lead us to our current time today, which is the Capitol Hill situation riots that took place not too long ago. So as we move forward, now we have in August, we have the downtown Portland Back to Blue rally. And so then we have Proud Boys who show up, and there's violence between right-wing protesters and left-wing counter-protesters. Then on August 23rd, the shooting of Jacob Blake takes place. 2 protesters were shot and killed. And then that's when nationally athletes from the NHL, NBA, WNBA, MLB, and MLS began, they went on strike in response to that particular police shooting. So then we get through September and October leading up to the presidential election. Now, we are still having protests. We're still having frustrations in our communities, and the news is going absolutely crazy because there's just so much going on in our country. Now, with all of the civil unrest, a global pandemic, and then the accusations of voter fraud. Now, we just kind of have a perfect storm for annihilation anxiety. So this brings us to what we're going to talk about today. Now, I told you in the beginning, I talk to my clients on a daily basis about anxiety issues, all sorts of anxiety issues, social anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, PTSD. I even discuss racial anxieties with my clients. And racial trauma with my clients. So many different types of anxiety. But what we want to focus on today is annihilation anxiety. So what is it? What is annihilation anxiety? I'm going to read it just so that you have a very clear picture of what it is. Annihilation anxiety is defined as a mental disorder regarding concerns over one's survival, preservation of self, and ability to function. So if we talk about the Capitol Hill rise, and let me just say this, I really wanted to make sure that I discussed both types of rioting. And when I say both types, again, I would love to say that this is not a partisan issue, but it is. It's on both sides, and everybody is forcing us to take a side or another. And that in and of itself causes anxiety. I mean, it causes me anxiety. I'm like, can I say this? Can I not say this? Should I say this? Should I not say that? Are they going to say something if I say this? Or are they going to say something if I believe that? It's ridiculous. But I know that we have to address this as it relates to sides. So yes, we have the Democratic side, we have the Republican side, and then we have everything in between. But the reality is we've seen riots on both sides. So the question is, what's going on? Why are we rioting? Why are we? Now, we're not talking about protesting. We're not talking about protest. We're not talking about peacefully protesting, because that's what Dr. Martin Luther King did. So let's not get it twisted. Dr. Martin Luther King protested peacefully. I don't know what's going on here today. So what we have the rioting, obviously, and we know that it's rioting because people are losing their lives. The violence is out of control. But my question goes back to why? Why are people literally losing their minds as it relates to this issue? So let's go back to what is annihilation anxiety. It's when a person gets to a point where they feel that they are losing all sense of self. And a person goes into emotional, psychological overdrive in order to preserve one's life, even if the danger is merely a perceived danger. Think about that. Even if it's a perceived danger. Now, here's another interesting point to make here. Survival. Now, we're talking about I want to survive at all cost. So I'm going to do whatever I can to not only make my point, but to let you know that I am not going to take anything from you if it means me losing myself, if it means me losing my family, if it means me losing the place that I currently have in society. So annihilation anxiety is survival related concerns integrated into fears of being overwhelmed, merged, disintegrated, or abandoned. Individuals with this type of anxiety usually have a catastrophic mentality. Catastrophic mentality. Catastrophic mentality. So let's talk about that for a minute, because one of the things I do is help my clients, again, on a regular basis, modify distorted thought. So when we're talking about a catastrophic mentality, we're talking about catastrophizing. So if anyone understands distorted thought processes, and that if you're familiar with CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, what you know, and I'll try and put it in layman's terms. I like to explain it to my clients like this. As one who practices cognitive behavioral therapy, I believe that what you think is what you feel is what you do. What you think is what you feel is what you do. So if you can recognize the faulty thought processes that you use, you can ultimately shift your mentality, shift your perspective. You can look at life just a little bit differently and then change how you feel about a situation or a circumstance. And when you change how you feel about a situation or circumstances, ultimately you can change your actions and your behavior. So the when I think about what took place um, in Minnesota, not long after George Floyd was killed. When I think about what has taken place in Portland, Oregon, with the riots there, when I think about what's taken place in Washington D.C. just a few weeks ago, when rioters stormed the Capitol, my question is, what are you thinking? Like, seriously, that's I would love to say that that's a rhetorical question, but it's not. Like, my question literally is, what are you thinking? Well, if we look at it from annihilation anxiety perspective, we know what you're thinking. You're afraid. You're afraid that everything that you live for is going to be taken, or you're going to be suppressed in some way, or someone is going to socially rape you. There's so much going on. So, really, at the root of all of this is fear. So, the final question would be, what do we do about it? How do we fix a situation that seems like it is so far out of control? Well, one thing that I would say as a therapist is every one of us has to take our own responsibility, personal and individual responsibility for our own emotional well being, first of all, but even more so to really establish who we are morally, ethically. We know now pretty much where people stand politically. Nobody is afraid to speak out on what they believe. But humanly speaking, I wonder, is there anything that allows us to look at another human being and recognize that that person bleeds red the same way that we do? So I would go out on a limb and say there really isn't a definitive answer to the question, other than everyone has to take responsibility for their own emotional, spiritual, and psychological well-being, and not blame others for not having certain things in life, or not feeling a certain way, or not walking in the happiness that you want to walk in. We are responsible for ourselves. So if you or anyone you know needs therapy, I would suggest you reach out to a professional to get the help that you need, because there's nothing wrong with getting help. For those of you who listen to me on a regular basis, you know that I say it all the time. Life is messy, life is complicated, and oftentimes life is painful. That's what therapists are here for. So I'd love for you to leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Give me your feedback. And again, at the end of the day, I believe that we all have to treat each other the way we want to be treated. And remember that we are all human beings and we all bleed red. If you want to connect with me, listen, be sure to follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and you can also go over to my website at jadajackson.com where I also give a lot of information and videos there. And please make sure to click like, comment, subscribe to the Chat With Me podcast on all social media platforms, and stay connected. I want to make sure that we can continue to have these chats.